Caleb edged slightly to the right as a figure came out of the shadows and slowly made its way towards the shelter of the bridge. He cocked his head, listening for anything unusual. He breathed in deeply, taking note of all the smells carried to him on the slight breeze. Brad touched his arm and lifted his chin towards the same figure. Caleb frowned. He couldn't smell a new shifter on the night air, but Brad's sources were reliable, and he hadn't been wrong before. Caleb needed to get closer. He watched as the figure stayed on the edge of the darkened shadows from the bridge, not getting too close to the others seeking shelter for the night. The figure slid its back against the wall and sat down. "Let's go," hissed Caleb. Brad and Caleb maintained the same distance between one another as they moved in a semicircle towards the squatting figure. Caleb was aware of the other members of his pack positioned around. Innately, he knew where they all were in relation to himself. It was easier when there was only a few of his pack, and all were in close proximity to himself. It was as if little beacons of light were in his peripheral vision, something he was unable to do with the whole pack. The figure hadn't moved, and Caleb still hadn't scented anything. They settled in closer towards the entrance under the bridge, and Brad had told him that the shifter had come in from the east. He said there was no set pattern for its movements. Caleb wondered if it was a hybrid, as the scent was really weak, although nowadays this was really rare. Most hybrids didn't survive childhood. The councils kept strict control of all the matings, birth and deaths. Even his own wolf lay dormant tonight, not picking up on anything. Under the bridge, the cold wall did nothing to ease her aches and pains. Her eyes were heavy, and she was so tired. She'd lost track of time and didn't even know what day it was. She rolled her head slightly to the side. She needed to be still, but would not fall asleep. It wasn't safe. Caleb was patient. Less and less noise came from under the bridge. Most of the people had settled down to sleep. It surprised him that a shifter would want to be this close to humans to try to blend in and hide. Brad waited patiently for the signal from Caleb. He knew the alpha was waiting for the right time. They needed to know who was in their territory. It wasn't the strongest scent he'd ever come across, and he wondered if this was even worth bothering. But Caleb ran a tight pack and wanted to know who this shifter was. From the corner of his eye, Brad saw Caleb turn his head towards him. Caleb raised his eyebrows and lifted his chin, silently asking if he was ready. Brad inclined his head. Caleb knew that once he started in on the target, the other pack members would know what to do. He didn't have to worry about them, but he needed to make sure the humans witnessed as little as possible. Slowly they crept through the underbrush, sometimes on their stomachs, keeping as low as possible. Just because this shifter gave off a weak scent didn't mean it was going to be easy to catch. Caleb signalled Brad to the right. He was now directly in front of the shifter. He lifted his head up slightly and breathed in deeply. Yes, now he was closer. He could smell shifter. He felt his wolf rise slowly, taking an interest. Caleb stopped about 12 yards in front of the figure, half hidden behind a scrawny rose bush. He held still as the figure rolled its neck and settled its head on its knees, facing away from him. The shifter was now looking towards Brad. Caleb slowly moved to the left, wanting to come between the shifter and the humans sleeping under the bridge. Something was definitely off, thought Caleb. Any shifter would have smelled him by now. This wasn't right. Maybe the shifter was waiting to attack. Caleb tensed, frozen in mid-stride, still keeping low to the ground. There had been no indication of weapons. He watched the figure for any slight movement. This seemed too easy. He looked across the ground towards his beater. Brad lifted his chin, letting his alpha know he was ready, and waited for Caleb to make his move. Caleb wondered if the figure's eyes were shut, as the breathing was shallow. He could see small blasts of cold air leave its mouth. He listened again for any signs of movement from under the bridge. Nothing. He felt no indication from the rest of the pack of any danger. He remained low to the ground and took 2 more steps before he stood up and walked quietly over to the figure. The shifter scent increased as he came forward, and now Caleb's wolf was on high alert. Why the hell hadn't this shifter sensed him? His wolf started whining. Caleb frowned as he reached his left hand down towards the mouth of the figure. He pulled upwards, forcing the figure to stand on unsteady legs. The struggle started, and small hands tried to pull his hand from its mouth. He wrapped his other arm around the waist of the shifter. He tried to move towards Brad, but as his body came flush with the figure, his wolf went crazy, and Caleb could feel the spark of heat as they got closer. His arm started tingling and became progressively hotter as it went all the way up to his shoulder. Dizziness invaded his mind. Bright lights danced in front of his eyes. He knew he needed to keep hold, but unable to do anything else, Caleb dropped to his knees.